I call the Honourable Member Sua Williams-Sio. Malo sui fua.
Malo sui fua, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity. I accept what the Minister has said about one of the reasons for why this particular bill came to the Social Services Committee. However, given that this is his last term in Parliament, and given that we've indicated to him that we're supporting this bill, but nevertheless there are reservations around some of the elements of it, and I would ask the Minister to take on board what my colleague Charles Chauvel has said with regard to the claim of right, because as I recall it, there was submissions who had some concerns and issues around it. And so I would simply ask the Minister to look at that. I think it's also important, Minister, through you, Chair, that collectively around this House we all agree that it is an issue that needs to be taken seriously. And as I have outlined in previous speeches, the legislation alone is not going to solve this problem. And I think the Minister should be seeing this piece of legislation as a legacy that he leaves behind for the rest of the parties here to build upon in the years ahead. And I say that as opening statements because I don't believe one iota that we are going to solve this overnight, because over many, many years we as a country have built up a culture, almost an immunity to some of the violence that does occur in society, but also in our homes, beamed through the television channels, etc. I don't believe also that we're going to get on top of this simply because when you link poverty with violence in the home, there are some real issues that do need to be tackled. And so the first point I'd ask the Minister is to take on board what some of the submitters have said around the claim of rights and also what my colleague Charles Chauvel has said. The other point I wanted to make, and I know the bill is narrowly focused on the package of how we would deal with perpetrators of violence, but the Children's Commissioner made a submission, and I want to highlight this for the Minister, that whilst they agreed in principle, they noted that the tougher penalties and broader range of offences will not provide a panacea, and then enforcement should not come at the cost of the broader social investment required to reduce child abuse and neglect. And the point I would make there is we would oppose the amendment as suggested by the ACT Party. And I think the ACT Party have got their heads in the sand so far, because by trying to be tough on crime, that's a political ploy leading up to the election. What they need to do, Mr. Chair, is they need to be listening to the organisations and the significant individuals who are leading the work around rehabilitation. And the stuff that the Social Services Committee members have heard is that putting people in jail is the last resort. And even when you do send people to jail, you've got to, sorry, Mr. Chair, we've got to be engaging with those and working out how we rehabilitate the offenders so that they return to society and take up their rightful positive role that they have to play in the long term if we're serious about this problem. So this is what I think of this amendment, Mr. Speaker. The ACT Party pull their head out of the sand and play seriously when they're looking at this particular problem and stop playing politics with it. The second point I'd like to make, Chair, is that, and that's the point that has been belaboured by the submission by the Children's Commissioner, to provide support programs for children and caregivers and rehabilitate child victims of abuse. And that goes further, because one of the submitters that I'd like to raise for the sake of the Minister through you, Chair, is the submission made by the National Council of Women, And they, the point that they make here is that families are being marginalised and believes ways need to be found urgently to recognise parenting as work and to create structures that enable all parents to opt for working at home as a parent if they so desire. Mr. Chairman.
I recognise the Honourable Rodney Hyde.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And